Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dr. Fernando Cepeda Ulloa, Professor of Administration at the Universidad de los Andes.
Mr. Vice President Joe Biden, and all organizers of this summit, you offer us the possibility to hear a political leader that has been a very emblematic leader from the United States who is highly appreciated all around the world. Senator for the state of Delaware for 34 years, and as such, President of the Committee of Judicial Matters, and in several occasions, President of the Strategic Committee of Foreign Affairs. Colombia has an enormous debt of gratitude with Senator and Vice President Joe Biden. And why do I say that? In his own party, in the Senate, the White House, he defended Plan Colombia and made it possible what was necessary to strengthen our governance, our democratic governance. I remember, as if it were yesterday, watching on television back in 2001 a session from the Committee of Foreign Affairs about the implementation of the commitment of Plan Colombia. And he was being interviewed with great knowledge. He interviewed a high worker from the Department of Defense asking about the state of the delivery of the helicopters for Colombia, and the answer did not leave him at ease. He ordered on the next day to have a list of the helicopters that were available to be able to study a soon delivery, a quick, swift delivery to our country, always working with a great sense of urgency that we could not find in other places. Joe Biden has been a citizen, a global citizen, a personality, more than an outstanding personality in the international world. He was specially sent by President Obama for Latin America, and in such virtue, he rendered a vision for America, the initiative for regional security in that part of this hemisphere, Central America. He extended relationships with Mexico and Brazil, and he opened a new horizon for the relationships with Cuba. So he visits us at a very crucial time, a new president-elect who was elected with the highest number of votes in our long-standing and sustainable democratic tradition, Iván Duque Márquez. He has a very important mandate to implement the final agreement, surpassing all kinds of difficulties that are very evident, and also to complete the framework of peace, to mobilize and incorporate our democratic society and other insurgent expressions, terrible manifestations of organized crime. A very difficult challenge and a very honorable responsibility has to recover the other dimension of the fortunate Plan Colombia to eliminate the immense cocaine crops that are putting at harm's way what has been qualified as the greatest success of foreign politics of the United States in the 21st century. And so it was celebrated in the White House back in February 2016. Andrés Pastrana, Álvaro Uribe, and Juan Manuel Santos, makers of the peace process still in course, were benefit by a bipartisan consensus in the United States that we have applauded and we want to preserve. His presence in this summit that is inspired by Concordia will really reinforce the environment of reconciliation that is needed by President Duque to materialize a absolute peace, which is what we all want. Vice President Joe Biden, welcome to Colombia, country that you have visited in several occasions. What a great satisfaction, and it is such a relief to have you here with us and to count with your amazing experience, with your great wisdom in crucial subjects for the Colombia of today and tomorrow. Just as it was very pleasant to speak to you, right in the middle of the presidential campaign of the United States back in 2016, during the Inter-American Dialogue, in the company of a very select group of Latin American business people, amongst them two Colombians, Carlos Andrés Uribe, president of Ladrillera Santa Fe, and Carlos Enrique Laverier, president of Alquería. So we are well aware of your knowledge and your affection for the Latin American region, your frank attitude to always be a truthful speaker, your exceptional condition as a man of integrity, as a politician. Please receive our expressions of gratitude and also our most sincere admiration for your experience as a public man, for your exemplary behavior as a member of a family. Your public life and your private life are a sort of a paradigm that is worthy of being imitated with greater reasons when there are such scarce models such as yourself. Joe Biden, he has preached through the power of his example. And that is what you, Mr. Vice President, have constantly demanded from your own country. We are anxious to hear you.
Thank you all very, very much. I quite frankly wondered who in the hell he was talking about. There was a famous American politician, as old as I am, I did not know him, in the 50s who ran for president on the Democratic ticket named Adlai Stevenson. And he had an expression, he said, "Flattery is fine as long as you do not inhale." I did not inhale. Mr. President-elect, it was an honor to get a chance to see you in the hall, but also, more importantly, to listen to you. I want the record to show that I asked who did all the visuals for the president. He said he did. He agreed to help me do it for me. You're awful good, Mr. President. In all sincerity, I think the approach you're taking is conciliatory, it's inclusive, it's my father had an expression, and my father was a high school educated man who was well read but never went to college, and he used to repeat to us all the time that everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity. And it seems as though that's what you're set about to do, to make sure you're completely inclusive to everyone in your society, knowing there'll be differences, but know that there are a lot of us in the United States who care deeply about the success of your country. And I don't know if the mayor is still here, but Mr. Mayor, we have a tradition in the United States that when we come into a mayor's city, he issues a special passport to allow you to be there. I want to thank you for allowing me to be in Bogotá, Mr. Mayor, and I look forward to getting a chance to spend a little time with you as well. Well, good morning, everyone. Let me start by thanking Nick and Matt for this conference and everyone at Concordia for organizing this gathering. For my part, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to return to Colombia. To return to Colombia, where I have been many times, a place that I've come to know well, a home of people whose future I personally care very deeply about. I made my first visit to Colombia almost 20 years ago as a United States Senator on the Foreign Relations Committee, at a moment when this country was gripped by chaos and violence and on the verge of collapse. In 2000, I stood on the floor of the United States Senate making the case for something I worked very, very hard on with others, making the case for Planned Colombia. And I said, we have an obligation in the interest of our children and the interest of the Hemisphere to keep the oldest democracy in place and give them a fighting chance. Today, we know how your citizens fought, many of them literally risking their lives, others risking their treasure to reclaim and take back Colombia. It wasn't but 25 years ago, I say to our Oecd leader, that bridge, Colombians were going the other way. They were going to Venezuela. But you reclaimed the dignity and the democracy of this country. We know how people of this country delivered the fundamental transformation through concerted leadership and hard work that was bolstered by a robust and sustained support of which has been mentioned here, a truly bipartisan in the United States consensus, Republicans and Democrats, through successive Colombian administrations of presidents of different parties. That bipartisan support has been consistent since Planned Colombia came forward. And you all stepped up. People said there was a lot of money the United States invested. They did. But you invested. You invested billions of dollars as well. We know how people put themselves on the line, took physical chances, risked personal well-being for the good of this country. And by the time of my most recent visit to Colombia, which the professor referred to in 2016, one of the last official trips I made as Vice President of the United States, peace, progress, and prosperity had become watchwords of the land that is truly remarkable. When Colombia is strong and secure, all of America is safer. My colleagues from America here are tired of hearing me saying this for the last 20 years. I literally, not figuratively, view Colombia as the keystone to the well-being of the Hemisphere. That is not hyperbole. When Colombia has a robust counter-narcotics operation, organized crime and drug trafficking is reduced, not just here, but throughout the region. And when Colombia prospers economically, the region does better as well. Or put it another way, if the opposite is true on both counts, the rest of the region is in trouble. If Colombia succeeds, it's possible to imagine a hemisphere that is secure, middle-class, democratic, and at peace from the northern reaches of Canada to the southern tip of Chile. I made that speech 6 years ago in the State Department, and some thought it hyperbole, but I believe it with every fiber in my being that it's within our grasp if we have the courage and determination to radically change this hemisphere to be the most powerful leading hemisphere in the world. We already have made much progress. The region today is a different place than it was 20 years ago. The cooperation and goodwill between our peoples has continued to grow on the educational front and the business front across the board, deeper than agreements even between our governments. We can't afford to let that wither. We've been working together in ways that benefit all of our citizens. And in the past, Colombian leaders or citizens have said, thank you. There's no reason to thank us. It's overwhelmingly in the interest of the United States of America. Overwhelmingly in our interest. I recall I was criticized in our administration when the president allowed me to make the point that I think the second most important foreign policy consideration for the United States of America at this moment in our history is Latin America and the Hemisphere. The other relates to the possibility of disintegration of parts of Europe. So I'm here today as a private citizen, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. That's the mantle I appear before you wearing. But most importantly, as a fierce friend and advocate for the people of Colombia and the region. I'm here to encourage all of us to be more optimistic about our prospects if we have the courage to step up and take on some of the really difficult challenges that are within our, as we say in America, within our wheelhouse. And I'd like to speak to a few elements of that future one at a time that will allow us to be free, a democratic society, middle class, secure, and at peace. First, we envision a future of security for the entire Western Hemisphere. There's no better place to start than with Colombian people's determination to establish a lasting peace. The peace accord was a historic breakthrough, though it shouldn't be minimized or ignored that there's significant disagreement. Too much has been suffered in Colombia as a consequence of the lack of peace. And I respect there's a deep disagreement within Colombia about the certain aspects of the peace agreement and peace accord and about the best way to move forward. But listening to you today, Mr. President-elect, I think you have it exactly right. For more than 5 decades of a crushing conflict, when so many have lost loved ones, forced out of their homes, it's totally and thoroughly understandable that there's strong opinions on all sides about the agreement. But please don't give up on the prospect of peace. I know better than most that new administrations are empowered to reevaluate and reexamine the policies of previous leaders. Disagreements and debates are essential to progress in any democracy on any issue. And on an issue that will affect the lives of every single Colombian, it's fully understandable why the debate persists. And as with many other agreements and accords throughout my history of the last 42 years watching negotiations, it's a big deal moving from negotiation to implementation, and it always requires adjustments. Being able to adapt to meet the needs on the ground is both critical and necessary for peace to be successful and sustainable. It's my hope, however, that those decisions about how to proceed will, number one, prioritize the vital interests of the Colombian people. 2, put Colombia on the best trajectory to move forward. Ensure that Colombia can continue to be a leader advancing peace and security within its own borders, but also throughout the region. You know, advancing security throughout Latin America and the Caribbean will also help address another of the key sources of regional instability, the migration of people fleeing the crushing poverty, crime, violence in their homelands. You see it today here in Colombia because of Venezuela. I note parenthetically, I believe it is a regional obligation to deal with these vast migrations and the reason for them happening. In my view, Colombia should not have to go it alone in absorbing the cost of the disintegration that's taking place in Venezuela. That's why we've become engaged. I think it's a regional responsibility. I know how hard this challenge is. As Vice President of the United States, I was, I believe, in Russia with President Putin about how we were changing our missile defense in Europe, and I got a call from the President that he wanted me to come home and in 2014 and lead our response to a similar surge in undocumented minors to our border at the time. All I can tell you is that the answer is not to lose or put aside our values, our principles, and our humanity. The abrupt policy changes at the U.S. southern border last month, they didn't make us safer. It delivered heartbreaking chaos and pain. You know, breaking up families isn't the answer, and a border wall isn't the answer either. The real key to solving this problem lies in addressing the root causes of migration that push people to leave behind everything they know and they love, undertake a dangerous journey for a chance at a better life. I always find it interesting in my country, parenthetically, that people talk about immigrants as this is an easy decision for them to make. It's awful damn hard, folks, for somebody to sit around their table in their kitchen and say to their family, let's sell everything we have. Let's give it to a coyote who's going to take us across the border in the United States, drop us in the desert in a language you don't speak, a country that doesn't want us. Won't that be fun? I would argue parenthetically the reason why America has been so successful is because we are a land of immigrants. We've been able to cherry pick the best of every single culture. From my great-grandparents picking up and leaving Ireland on coffin ships in the middle of a famine, to today, the people who leave and pick up and leave and come are people who are optimistic, who are determined, who are resilient, who have character. That's why I led an intensive effort during the Obama-Biden administration to engage directly with the governments of the Northern Triangle countries in Central America to help them undertake ambitious political reforms and to go after criminal gangs responsible for the smuggling of drugs and people, to see that greater economic opportunity in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador so people can imagine a better life for themselves in their home countries. Together, I went up on the Hill and made a commitment to the men and women I work with in both parties my whole adult life, promising them that we would not move forward with the aid package unless these countries met the commitments that they made. But we put together a bipartisan proposal for $750 million for those three countries. The United States can and should help these efforts. It's in our direct interest to do so, and we need to invest more, not less, in the tools to get the job done. It also requires regional engagement. At the time, Mexico and Colombia were critical partners in developing the plan, this plan of action, the Northern Triangle countries, and following through on those commitments that our countries made to tighten border security, to train regional security forces, to facilitate asylum applications. These all remain critical reducing the flow of migration. In the end, however, real and lasting change will only take root if the leaders in the Northern Triangle set up more and make some very hard decisions with politicians and business leaders and elites putting more skin in the game to implement the necessary reforms and take responsibility for ensuring a better future. That's what sparked the real change that took place in Colombia with Plan Colombia. It's hard. There's no easy or quick fix. But the cost of investing in a secure and prosperous Central America is modest compared to the cost of allowing violence and poverty to fester. And I hope that all of our nations will work together to reduce these root causes of this insecurity. Secondly, we envision a future of a region that's middle class. What does that mean? In my country, I often talk about a middle class as not a number. It's a value set. It's making sure that parents can put food on the table for their families. It means investing in education so children can flourish. It means protections for workers and policies that work to reduce inequality. It means people are hopeful about their future and optimistic about their children, that their children will actually have a better life than they have had. Practically speaking, it means economies need to be growing and advancing to succeed, to give everyone an opportunity. And as I said at the beginning, there can't be baseline expectations for this hemisphere as a whole. Total trade in goods in the Western Hemisphere is now more than $1.3 trillion. And our economic integration has brought our economies and societies closer together. Colombia recently joined the OECD, only the third country in Latin America to do so, following Mexico and Chile. Joining the OECD is an important signifier of Colombia's commitment to a modern economy and a future of greater leadership on the global stage. And we soon could see Costa Rica join as well. Another milestone in the hemisphere. In November, Argentina will become the first South American country to host the G20 summit. This is a time we should be looking at the bright side of what we could do. Be more optimistic. We have reason to be optimistic. If we have the courage to act, there's so much we can do now. We have everything we need to lead the 21st century global economy right here in this hemisphere. We possess the resources, the ingenuity, the value, the dynamism. We just have to keep pushing forward to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared throughout the population, which is not the case now. Economic growth requires investment, both at home and from abroad. And businesses do not invest in nations where the rules are not transparent and the procedures, where the court system is not fair, and where intellectual property is not protected. That's not a moral judgment I'm making. There's sort of a new rule of, like a rule of physics, a new rule of economics in the world. Take a look. Where do people invest? The most important thing we can do to ensure a middle-class future for the region is to root out corruptive practices, corrupt officials, Corruption is a cancer. It eats away at the body politic, promoting inequity, siphoning away billions of dollars, government dollars, that could otherwise be used to feed children, build schools, improve infrastructure, significantly increase security, enhance equality. Corruption aids and abets human rights abuses. It fuels organized crime. It seeds instability throughout the larger region. It's not just here in this hemisphere. I do an awful lot of work in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe. It's the reason, it's a new weapon by oligarchs and autocrats being used in the conduct of foreign policy. And corruption undermines democracy itself by dissolving citizens' faith in their leaders, their institutions, and their very system of government. These problems have all fed on one another. Fighting corruption is not a political strategy. It's a tool to wield against, it's not a tool to wield against opponents. It's essential for the core prosperity of all of our countries. And we have to take it seriously, more seriously than we have. The stakes are much too high. It requires citizens becoming activists, brave prosecutors and honorable judges pursuing corrupt officials, anti-corruption commissions dismantling criminal networks, and a growing sense that no one is above the law. Another key ingredient for a middle-class future depends on securing access to energy that's affordable and reliable. If it can't dependently turn on the lights, businesses aren't going to invest. Students aren't going to reach their highest potential. If you can't study in the dark or easily connect to the internet, economies and futures stagnate. And right now, more than 34 million people in Latin America still lack access to electricity. We can change that. You wonder, why am I talking about Latin America to you? Because you're part of the solution. Advancing energy security in the region was a personal priority of mine as Vice President of the United States. I met repeatedly with leaders from the Caribbean, where energy costs are the highest in the world due to their dependence on imported oil, to support their efforts to transition to cleaner, more affordable energy sources. In Central America, we invested millions of dollars to develop power sectors, helping regional electricity suppliers develop clean energy plans and support efforts to maximize the use of regional transmission lines. Equally important is continuing to advance the vision of a pipeline for natural gas from Mexico through Central America to Panama and into South America. Folks, it will enable citizens and businesses in the region to access energy and the sources of energy, integrating and reconnecting these systems. It's expanding cooperation and trade to lower cost, developing energy sources. It's all within our power. But special interests don't want to see that happen because they're benefiting some by this fractured system now. With concerted attention and commitment of leaders throughout the region to make a priority of this eminently resolvable challenge can go a long way in changing the region. Working together, we can create a more effective and prosperous regional energy market that will facilitate growth for everyone, everywhere. And by the way, The energy companies will benefit greatly as well. Finally, all of us in the Western Hemisphere have to continue to invest in the future that is fully democratic for our region. Our shared and stated commitment to democracy, declared in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, is unique in the world. We must believe that, quote, the peoples of the Americas have the right to democracy and their governments have an obligation to promote and defend it, end of quote. And as we've seen in recent elections here in Colombia and in Mexico, people of the region are empowered to express their will. Soon, we'll also hear from citizens of Brazil as to what kind of country they want. By the end of the year, 6 countries will have new presidents, not to mention many new parliaments, gubernatorial and mayoral elections throughout the region. But this is not where the responsibility for democracy ends. Being a democracy means speaking out for the values that form the true basis for a free and open society. It means promoting the things that we know matter. It means condemning abuses that fly in the face of the most basic democratic values. And we can't mince words about what's happening in Venezuela. The government is deploying the same repressive tactics as past authoritarian strongmen have, violating human rights and the will of Venezuelan people. Democratic forces in Venezuela are under tremendous strain. And I urge everyone in this room, elected and non-elected officials, not just to stand in solidarity with Venezuelan people during this time of great need, but to take action. Encourage your governments to be more forceful in the response to the abuses that are taking place. Visa denials for those engaged in corruption and human rights violations. Targeted financial sanctions against sectors that are complicit in this abuse. Supporting international humanitarian organizations that are trying to ameliorate the terrible suffering of the people of Venezuela, and so much more. The only hope is for overwhelming support from the international community to pursue their government from the outside. That's why the efforts of the Lima Group to call Venezuela government to account are so critical. We have to work to begin to help the people of Venezuela peacefully reclaim the historic traditions of their democracy, ensure that political prisoners are freed, and address the swiftly advancing transgressions of human rights. Colombia is providing refuge and safe haven for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans who have fled the insecurity and hyperinflation created by their leader in their homeland. We all must do more to find solutions. The international response to refugees from Venezuela is woefully short on what is needed, in my view. The international response to aid and assist you. It's not Colombia's problem alone, and Colombia should not carry the burden alone. The Hemisphere has an obligation, as we do in helping Brazil as well. We should all be helping. That's why the United States provided additional support for Brazil and Colombia to address the refugee problem. But all of our governments need to invest beyond our borders for the future of our region. And I hope that the Lima Group can find a way to make sustainable progress on this critical issue. This is a challenge to the very democratic character of our region, and it demands leadership. It demands being willing to spend political capital to do what's right. And by the way, I'm not speaking to just political elite leaders. This is a room filled with leaders from the world of business and civil society and democratic institutions. These responsibilities rest on all of us. And I think it's especially critical for the leaders of my country to hear the resounding and unified message of support from the international business community for partnership between our countries and respect for the democratic process. We must all hold ourselves to the highest possible standards. We have to resist the siren song of populism and phony nationalism that threatens us both north and south, including my own country. In fact, this is a global challenge. I recently met with a group of former heads of state at the Copenhagen Democratic Summit on the responsibility of an engaged citizenry and leaders to defend democracy against the entrenching threats of authoritarianism, which is taking place right now in Europe. This is a moment where repressive regimes from Russia and China to Iran to Venezuela are weakening democratic forces in their societies and strengthening their grip on power. We're seeing institutions and freedom slowly but determinedly being shut down little by little. We're seeing democratic ideals that are the core of our identity, our regional identity. We see them under attack. And if we fail to meet these challenges and defend our most basic ideals, if we fail to provide the leadership, the opportunities we've worked so hard to cultivate could slip away much more rapidly than you think. There's a book written by two professors in America I recommend to you. It's called How Democracies Die. They do not die as a consequence of battering rams knocking down the doors of presidents. They die when the guardrails protecting the abuse of power that are institutionally involved in elections are gradually dismantled. The future we envision for ourselves will falter and fall short unless we begin to speak more loudly. I think this is a critical moment for our region, a crossroads marked both by opportunities and challenges. It reminds me of the words of a Colombian author who wrote, and I think this is, I'm always kidded by my colleagues in the United States Senate because I'm always quoting Irish poets. And they think I quote them because I'm Irish. That's not the reason I quote them, because I quote them because I thought they're the best poets in the world. But there's a Colombian poet who I think summed it up best, and let me make sure I get it exactly right, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He wrote, "It is not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams." Let me say it again. It is not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams. We cannot, must not, should not stop pursuing the dream of a secure, middle-class, and democratic hemisphere. There's no reason why, and I mean this, there is no reason why the Western Hemisphere cannot lead the world in the 21st century. It's just time for us to get up, pick our heads up, realize what power we have, what capacity exists, and take on those elements in this hemisphere, in Colombia, and in my own country that have a diminished view of the future of the region. Whenever I was referred to in the White House, I was always referred to as the White House optimist. as if my grandfather, Finnegan would say, as if I fell off the turnip truck yesterday, as if I was the new guy. I'm there longer than all of them. But I know a couple things. I know the history of the journey of my country. And I know that here and in my country and throughout the region, ordinary people can do extraordinary things, given a half a chance. All they want is a chance. It's totally within our power to provide that chance. Mr. President-elect, I look forward to watching you do just that here in Colombia, continuing the progress. Folks, it's time to stand up. Let's reclaim all this. It's within our power. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Daniel Palacios for the presentation of this year's Jose Acevedo y Gomez Award.
Doctor Iván Duque Márquez, presidente electo de la República de Colombia. Doctora Marta Lucía Ramírez Blanco, vicepresidenta electa de la República de Colombia. Mr. Joseph Biden, ex vicepresidente de los Estados Unidos de América. Dr. David Howell Petraeus, former director of the CIA. Dr. Matthew Swift, founder of Concordia. Dr. Nicolás Logotetis, co-founder of Concordia. Dr. José Fernando Quiroga, expresidente de la República de Costa Rica. Doctora Laura Chinchilla, expresidenta de la República de Costa Rica. Dr. John Negroponte, exsecretario de Homeland Security de los Estados Unidos. Dr. Guillermo Botero, presidente de FENALCO. A los integrantes del Leadership Council de Concordia, la doctora Paula Dobriansky, ex subsecretaria de Estado para Asuntos Globales. Dr. Mark Green, administrador de la Agencia de los Estados Unidos para el Desarrollo Internacional. Señores congresistas, concejales de Bogotá que nos acompañan hoy, autoridades e invitados. Este pedazo me han pedido hacerlo en inglés. Entonces, Mr. Vice President, in the name of the city of Bogotá, I would like to welcome you. It is an honor for our city to host such a distinguished visitor. Vice President Biden has had a very successful public life, a very long and successful public life. I would say that you embody what being a public servant should mean and represent. Throughout Vice President Biden's career, especially in the Senate, where you were one of the strongest advocates for Plan Colombia, you have been a strong ally to our country. As a distinguished visitor to our city, and in the name of the Bogotá City Council, it is an honor for me to present you with the Jose Acevedo y Gomez Award, the highest distinction the city of Bogotá gives to prominent visitors. Mr. Vice President, you have been an old and good friend to Colombia. We hope we can now call you a good and long-lasting friend of Bogotá. I will now ask the police aide to present the award and the reading of the resolution.
Resolution 266 of July 11th of 2018, for which the Civil Order of Merit Jose Acevedo y Gomez is conferred to Vice President Joseph Rivenet Biden in the Great Grand Cross category, that on January 12, 2017, President Obama presented Biden with the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction, the nation's highest civilian honor. And out of the foregoing resolve, first article, according with the decision second Vice President.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ambassador, I'm having lunch with President Obama next Monday. I'm wearing this to lunch.